recordings to convert correctly, but hopefully today it'll work. So today, by special request, we are going to talk about bed bugs and then some other creepy crawlies.
Bed bugs.
So Rhea, you asked to talk about bed bugs. Do you want to tell us why you're curious about bed bugs?
Bed bugs eat our blood because they need to grow by eating their blood, by sucking their.
But why did you want to learn? Why did you want to learn about bed bugs?
Because our Google our show or screen it didn't shows pictures
How come you
of
don't like to put your
Oh.
tiny
We just don't have it on right now.
They suck other people's blood because that's why I want to learn that.
Okay. Well, that's really great. And I'm glad that you brought up this topic because you guys have come up with so many good topics to talk about in the next couple of weeks. So as Rhea asked, today we're going to cover bed bugs and then cover some other creepy crawlies. So first we're going to have our introduction. Then we'll talk about bed bugs. Then we'll talk about some other bugs. And then we'll do our activities and our resources. So I don't think we have any new friends today. So I'll just go through this quick. I'm Megan. I'm Aiden and Lizzie's mom. And because I have a background in science, one of the classes I actually took was called parasitology in college. So it was all about parasites, or basically bugs that can only live when they have a host to live on or eat off of. So I learned a lot about bed bugs and ticks and things when I was doing that in school.
Hello, Megan.
Hi, Carmen. Hi, Inez.
I've done my homework as well, but we didn't have time to send it.
Oh, that's okay. You can send it later.
Okay.
So today we're talking because it's summertime and your moms and dads are busy. And you guys have had such great questions today. So I'm really excited to talk about all the things that you want to learn about. It's great. Okay, so on to bed bugs. So what are bed bugs? Well, bed bugs is a common name for a species in the genus called Cymex. And there's another species of bug that's also called a bed bug, but today we're going to talk about this one, C. lectularius. And they're in the kingdom Animalia, which makes sense, right? Because they're animals. And then in the phylum Arthropoda and class Insecta. So they're true insects. And this is what they look like when they're adults. So there's a bed bug. Obviously, they're not quite that big as they are on your screen. They're pretty small, but I'll show you that a little bit later. So where do bed bugs occur? You guys might remember when we talk about animals, we usually talk about their range. And their range is all the places that they live. Bed bugs, their range or where they occur is pretty much the whole world. And that's because they hang out with humans. So anywhere that humans are, which is their host, bed bugs can be. So they've been found all over the world in almost every area that's been colonized or that people live in. And in the past, people thought that you got bed bugs maybe because you were poor or you lived in a big shelter or you were dirty somehow, but that's actually not the case. Bed bugs can live anywhere in any kind of housing, actually. And today, bed bugs live in a lot of different locations. They can be in hotels or trains or cruise ships or even airplanes sometimes. Just because they can be there, though, it's good to note that that doesn't mean that it's common. So you don't have to worry every time you get on an airplane or a train or anything. And bed bugs are also usually reported. So if you have bed bugs in your house or you see them somewhere, you usually try to report it to your local agency, like a local government of some sort, so that they can help track it. And that's not required everywhere, though, so we don't know a whole bunch about how many cases of bed bugs there are, but sometimes they're reported, and that does help us. So they grow from an egg through a bunch of different cycles. So you might remember from some of the other insects and things that we talked about before, they have different stages, sometimes called instars, and they start out as a little tiny egg that's a millimeter long, so it's pretty small. And then they grow through these stages where they pretty much look the same, but they keep molting or breaking out of their old skin and then they have new skin and they're a little bit bigger. And so in between these stages, they're eating. So they're eating some blood, and then they're growing bigger, getting new skin. And then eventually they turn into an adult that's about 5.5 millimeters long. And they have flat bodies, and they're about the size of an apple seed when they're full grown. So, and they're usually they're kind of brownish too, but after they eat, because they eat blood and it fills up their tummy, then they're a little bit more reddish in color, and their bodies are a little bit fatter because they've got stuff in their stomach. They don't fly or anything, but they can move kind of quickly. And the females, once they get to this adult stage, can lay 5 eggs a day. They lay up to 5 eggs per day, and they just keep laying eggs, so they can lay hundreds of eggs. And then once those eggs are released, and then they hatch, and then this whole cycle starts over again. So when they're little like this, they're called nymphs. And they just can kind of continue to shed their skin and then go through this cycle. So, and although they are kind of annoying, they don't actually spread diseases or anything. So you don't have to worry about like getting sick from them or anything. So as Rhea mentioned, bed bugs actually eat blood, or human blood. So how do they eat that blood? Well, they have mouth parts that kind of cut through the skin, and then they have special saliva or spit in their mouth. And that spit has 2 really cool things in it. It has anticoagulant, which means it keeps the blood from clotting. So when we get a scrape or a cut, our blood clots and it thickens up and we get a scab, right? And then the skin starts to heal over. Well, they have special stuff in their spit that keeps the blood from clotting so that they can keep drinking it. Because if you can imagine, if you were drinking water through a straw and the water started to thicken up into like Jello, it'd be pretty hard to suck it through the straw, right? So their special stuff keeps the blood kind of flowing like water. And then they also have a painkiller in their saliva so that it doesn't hurt when they bite you, which is pretty cool. And most humans don't really have any reaction at all to the bites, but some can have some allergic reactions or even extreme allergic reaction. And when they bite, there's usually some swelling with maybe like a red spot occasionally, and they actually like to eat when people are sleeping. So they use their kind of sharp little mouth parts here to do that. And you can see under a microscope, they're actually long and they've got kind of a tube inside. So almost like a needle that they use to suck up blood. Mila, did you have a question?
Yeah, does it itch when they bite you or when they bite
Yeah, so even though they have this stuff in their saliva that makes it not hurt, sometimes we have allergic reactions to them, just like you would have a reaction to like a mosquito bite or something else, or maybe even I have reactions to, I'm allergic to my cat and to grass and to a whole bunch of other things, and they make me really itchy. So it's almost like having hives on your body. So where they bite, you can have an allergic reaction to their saliva, and then you get kind of a red raised bump.
And then also I have one more question. So how long does it take for a bedbug to reach its adult stage, like from an egg?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it can be a couple weeks actually, but I will double check on that for you. Let me make myself a note. How long to adult? Okay. I'll make sure I put that in the email I send out, okay? So bedbugs, how they eat or how they get to their host is that they're attracted mostly by carbon dioxide. So when we're breathing out, we're releasing carbon dioxide, and kind of like mosquitoes that use carbon dioxide to find humans, bedbugs do that as well. And also they're drawn to warmth. So because a lot of times when we're sleeping, you know, obviously we're breathing still when we're sleeping and we're nice and warm. That's when they kind of come and have a snack usually. And when they're adults, they feed usually every 5 to 7 days. So it doesn't spend most of its life looking for people. You know, most of the time it's in a shelter, and then it comes out to eat every once in a while. Let's see. So here's a good picture of what happens when they do bite. So sometimes people don't have anything that happens to their skin. They don't have a reaction to it at all. And sometimes they get small flat spots, or some people even get like blisters with really, really itchy spots. And that all depends on your own immune system. And the bites can be like in a line a lot of times on the body. And a lot of times too, the symptoms or the itchiness or rash or whatever you get doesn't occur until a few days after the bites actually happen. So like many allergic reactions in humans, the reaction gets stronger the more often you're exposed to the bed bugs. So just like if you're, say you have a peanut allergy and you keep eating peanuts, your reaction usually gets worse each time. If you guys have heard of stuff like that with food allergies. And the same kind of thing can happen with bed bugs. So the more often you get bit by them, a lot of times the more itchy and things you will get. And even though that happens, a lot of people can get treatment for this. So you can go to your doctor to get like a special cream to help you not itch anymore. But the best treatment is always getting rid of the bed bugs so that they're not biting at all anymore. So another question that we heard was, where do bed bugs live? And I bet you guys can guess where they live from their name. They usually live in beds. So because remember, they like carbon dioxide, so the gases that we breathe out, and they like warmth, and they don't really fly or anything, it's easiest for them to have a snack when we're sleeping. So they like to hang out in beds. And that means that, you know, if you're at school or other places where you're not really sleeping and say the chairs and things like that are hard and there's not a good place for them to hide, that's not really a good place for the bed bugs to hang out. So I put some silly comics here for you guys to see the bed bugs hanging out in bed. And in this first one, he says, what's room service like in this hotel? And then the bed bug over here says, the people I ate last night were pretty good, because they're hanging out in bed. And then the other one, this bed bug is inviting this guy to go to sleep because he's hungry, right? So even though we sometimes worry about getting bed bugs you hear stories about places like at the movies or things like that, it's really, really uncommon. So bed bugs hang out the most in really dense or kind of packed housing situations, and they like to hide in places. So if there's not really anywhere for bed bugs to hide where you are, you don't have to worry too much about it. So how do bed bugs get from place to place? This was another question that I saw come up a lot. And bed bugs travel a little bit along or on the personal items or the things that you have of the person that they're kind of snacking on, right? So if you accidentally bring them into the house through like luggage or old furniture or something like that, sometimes that happens, but it's not something that you guys need to probably worry about very much, especially right now because we're all hanging out in our houses and we're not traveling and going a lot of different places. It would be pretty hard for something like this to happen. So it's definitely not something you need to worry about too much. But if you are concerned and you want to take a look, you can check around for bed bugs, and there are some things that you can look for. So Rhea, I know you were a little bit worried about this, but if there were bed bugs somewhere, you would notice the signs. So even though they're small and they seem like they're sneaky, they actually leave clues for you to find. So you would definitely know if they were hanging out. So, and your mom and dad would know too, so you don't really have to worry about it. But if you want to look, they leave little black or brown stains where they live. Sometimes when they're molting into those different life cycles, they'll leave their skin behind. And then if you see the adults around, excuse me, I was gonna sneeze. If you see the adults around, that's another good size or another good sign. And remember, we said they look kind of like apple seeds. So if you think about apple seeds, they're not actually that tiny. So you would definitely be able to see them. And if someone does have them, you can actually get rid of them by having someone like an exterminator come to your house, and they'll use chemicals to get rid of them, or they can use heat. So bed bugs actually really don't like heat. And you can use what's called mechanical or like a physical activity to get rid of them. You can vacuum them up, or you can heat treat your house. So if you heat up your house over like 115 or so degrees Fahrenheit, which is looks like about 45 degrees Celsius for Carmen and Inez. After about 2 hours, they'll die in that heat. So they can't stand a lot of heat. So a really easy way to get rid of them when you have the exterminator over is they'll kind of hook up your house to like these vents and pipe in a bunch of hot air. And that hot air will eventually kill the bed bugs. And then also, you know, just washing your sheets and things through the washer and dryer that you have at your house, that gets hot enough to kill them as well. So it can be pretty easy to get rid of them. It's not something you guys need to be worried about. And you shouldn't worry, because I think all of you live with your family, right? You live with moms and dads that are washing your bedding, and they're helping you right now to stay safe from COVID, which means you guys are all hanging out in your houses and you're not going to sleep over anywhere. So it's definitely not something you need to worry about at all. And even though I mentioned that they kind of occur anywhere people live, that doesn't mean that they occur everywhere that people live. So even though they do feed on blood and that seems a little bit scary, it's probably not something that you guys have to worry about in your own house. Does that help, Rhea? Do you feel a little bit better about bed bugs? Do they seem less scary? Okay.
Yes.
Yes, good. Okay. So now we're going to talk about some other little creepy crawly bugs that can come up sometimes. So one of them is lice. So you guys might be familiar with lice because when you go to school, a lot of times the nurse, at least when I went to school, the nurses would come around every once in a while and they'd look for nits, which are the eggs, and lice, which are the adults, and they look like this under a microscope. And they would come around and do that with a little metal or a little wooden kind of stick thing and look through the parts of your hair, and especially in the back of your hair. Have you guys had that happen at school ever? Yeah, Olivia, did you have something you wanted to say?
Actually, before the virus, like towards the beginning of the year, one of the boys in my class, he was doing his math, and then one of the lice bugs fell out of his hair, and then they sent him home.
Yeah, so usually if they find out that you have lice, they'll send you home, and they do that so that you can get your lice removed. And so lice, you don't get lice because you're dirty or anything. You can wash your hair every day and still get lice. It's usually transferred from like sharing things that you probably shouldn't share, like hats or helmets or things like that. And you can remove lice by washing with special shampoo and then combing them out. And there's actually special places you can go as well. Mila.
So 2 things. Well, actually 3 things. So when I was really little, I got lice one time and we had to like clean everything. So that wasn't good. And then also, I think I have that same exact lice brush from my picture.
Yeah, that's funny. So I have also had lice. I got lice at summer camp when I was a kid, and I promised I was showering and doing everything, but with lots of people around, it's really easy to spread them, especially when you're all living and sleeping in close quarters. Lizzie, do you want to talk about the lice salon a little bit that you went to?
Sure. Like
So,
at the
go ahead, sweetie.
at the lice salon, like what they did was like they had this like hair dryer that got really hot, and they had this like special attachment on it, and they were using it on my head so that it would like heat up the lice and like they kill them and they die. And it got really hot and it was kind of uncomfortable.
Yeah, but it didn't burn or anything, right?
No, but the lady said that I did better than most of the kids that came.
Yeah. So if you have trouble getting rid of lice at home, now there are special places you can go where it's like a whole salon where they just work on getting rid of lice. So I had tried to get rid of Lizzie's lice at home with shampoo and combs, but I must not have gotten them all. And that happens because the eggs that I showed you before are kind of glued to the hair. And so it can be hard to get rid of all of them, and then they can still hatch. So you usually have to kind of shampoo or comb them out a couple times. But it's not so bad. It doesn't mean you're dirty or anything. And it can be pretty easy to get rid of, especially if you go to a place like this, like Lizzie went to.
And also, so I got this special this special stuff that I got spray in my hair, like after I take a bath or a shower, and then we brush through my hair like normal. Except this stuff was special, and it was like this mint-free stuff, and it smelled of mint.
Oh, it smelled like mint, and it helped get rid of them? That's cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
I forget.
Okay.
Yeah.
So another creepy crawly that we have kind of all around the world are ticks. And ticks are a lot of different varieties of insect. And they live, these ones specifically in the US, but I'm sure there are different kinds in Asia and Europe and Africa. And ticks, like bedbugs, feed on human blood, or on the blood of animals. So a lot of ticks are specialized to what they chomp on. So there's a bunch of different kinds of ticks in the US, and some of them can spread disease, but they'll bite kind of dogs and cats and people and deer. Lots of times deer have a lot of ticks, or like squirrels and things like that, which is a good reason not to handle wild animals. Olivia?
Frodo, every month Frodo takes tick and flea protection.
Perfect. Yeah, that's a really good way to keep them off of your pets, and we'll talk about that a little bit. So one of the most common ones that I see is the American dog tick. And they live in grassy areas and along like paths and trails when you're hiking. And they, let's see, let me skip ahead a little bit here, look kind of like this when they're fat. They look like kind of gross little gray beans. And I've seen them on dogs quite a bit. And you can pull them off. You just have to make sure that you get their head parts, because if the head parts stay stuck in the dog, they can be really irritating to the skin. And you can put special medicine on your dog, usually once a month, on the back of their neck, or they sometimes have chewable tablets, and you can get them for cats too. And it helps.
Frodo takes it by mouth.
Oh, Frodo, yeah, that's a lot easier. Yes.
I've gotten a tick called the deer tick.
Mm-hmm.
I've gotten like 3 of those. Yeah.
I've had one too. It was in my armpit. Ooh. Carmen? Oh, yep.
Well, my dogs have special collars for ticks and those insects that eat their blood.
That's a really good point. You can get special collars for your pets that are usually flea and tick collars, and they have the medicine in the plastic in the collar, so it helps kind of spread it over their body. And that way, if fleas or ticks come in contact with either the collar or the pet's skin, they might start to bite, but then it usually kills them. So going back a little bit, you can identify different types of ticks depending on where you live by what they look like. And the problem is that when they're nymphs or when they're babies, they're really, really small. So if you happen to see a tick on your dog or anything, you should make sure you try to get some tweezers and get it really close to the skin as much as you can, so that you get those mouth parts, and you pull the tick's body away from the skin. You don't want to squish it, because if you squish it, it can push bacteria and stuff out of its mouth, which you don't want to do. And then you can clean your dog's skin with warm soap and water. And then for us, for humans, we can try to avoid getting tick bites as well. So when you're out hiking, there's some things you can do. You can make sure you're walking in the center of the trail, so you don't want to go through long grass. It's good to tuck your pants into your socks, because
we do that. There are woods. So our backyard, there's woods in the back of it. So if we ever were to go back there, we tuck our socks in our pants.
Perfect. That's a very good idea. You can also use some insect repellent to keep them away. When you come in, you should definitely check over yourself for fleas and ticks. Like if you're hiking or camping, you should take a look. And they like places that are kind of dark and warm. So like I mentioned, I had one in my armpit once, and they like to hang out like around the cuffs of your socks and shoes or your waistband. So it's good to check places like that. And then also, showering after you come inside too can really help, because if they're on you but they haven't started to bite you yet, the water can just wash them away.
I have a question.
Sure.
So once me and my dad went camping, and he got a tick, a big one, and then we didn't have any tick here. So we used chapstick. Why does that help?
So chapstick or like Vaseline or thick things like that, they actually smother the tick or sometimes irritate them enough that they let go. So a lot of times when people get certain kinds of like fly bites and things, you can cover them with Vaseline, and then the insect can't get any more oxygen, because a lot of times they actually breathe through their skin. So if you like basically clog up all their skin, they can't breathe, and then they'll let go.
My mom and dad, they also, everybody on our family, on their car keys, they have tick keys.
Oh, yeah.
So there's a little hole in it, and then you put the tick like in the hole, and then you slide it, and then the tick comes off.
Yep, I have a thing like that too that I used to carry when I walked my dogs a lot. So it's a good idea to be aware of ticks and make sure that you kind of clean the area after you remove them if you have them. But trying to prevent them is always better if you can. Okay, and then the last creepy crawly I want to talk about is fleas. So Olivia kind of mentioned this before with Frodo getting his medicine, which I bet keeps fleas and mosquitoes away.
And we went to the beach, and there were like these small fleas, and we called them sea fleas.
Oh,
they came in the water and in the sand.
Yeah.
Megan.
Yes.
I once had a tick on the back of my ear.
Oh, that's an interesting place. Yeah, so it must have been like a dark little warm crevice there.
It was stuck, and she needed to go to the doctor.
Yeah. So if you can't get a tick removed, you can go to urgent care or something like that to get some help, and they'll usually be able to do it for you. Okay, so fleas usually feed on animals. So like you see here, there's a dog, and they have a little bit different life cycle. Remember how when I showed you the bed bugs, they kind of look the same the whole time. They just kept getting bigger with the same body shape. Well, fleas go from eggs to larvae to pupa to adults. So kind of more like the life cycle of a butterfly almost. And most of this life cycle doesn't occur on the thing that they're feeding on, right? It actually occurs somewhere else. So if you've ever had dogs that have fleas, you have to check like their bedding and carpets and things like that, because that's where a lot of the eggs and the larvae hang out. To check your animal for fleas, what you want to do is look for kind of these like little dark dirty spots when you brush them. And this is actually the kind of stuff that the fleas leave behind after they're feeding. So it's kind of like flea scat. And the adults look like this. So this is under a microscope though, or magnified. So they won't look obviously this big, but fleas can, as you can see from their big legs here, they can actually jump. And so once you see one, you kind of got to grab it and squish it and pop it as quick as you can, because they'll scramble away from you. And they're very, very thin. When you look down their body from the head to the legs, they're actually like kind of like little flat pancakes. And they're shaped like that to make it easy to walk through and hide in the hairs. So if you see something like this on a pet, you should definitely tell an adult. But it's not a terrible crisis or anything, because you can get rid of them. And I see Mila says her cat had fleas about a year ago. It's actually pretty common, and they can be removed. And I had a friend that's dog got fleas that I helped to get rid of. And it's kind of a process, but once you go through all the steps, you can easily get rid of them. So the first thing you do is bathe your pet. So there's special flea and tick shampoos that you can put on them. The hardest part about doing this is that once you soap it up, you have to wait for a while to allow the shampoo to work. And even if dogs don't mind getting a bath, sometimes it's hard to get them to stand still for 10 minutes while you let soapy water sit on them. And then once you treat your pet by putting flea and tick spray on them after that, you need to clean and treat your home and then also your yard. So there are ways you can do this with chemicals, but there are also natural ways you can do this. So usually there's like sprays or powder that you can put around that basically interrupt their skin and make them kind of break apart so that they can't live anymore. And that way it's not like poisonous or bad for the environment. So you definitely need to make sure you're washing fabric and bedding for the dogs and their toys and things like that. And then your carpets and furniture, basically anywhere the dogs hang out. and vacuuming and things like that, and then you can get rid of them. So it's best if you can to have your dog or cat on a preventative, and to prevent means to keep something from happening. So if you put them on a preventative, it means it's medicine that keeps fleas from even starting out in the first place. So especially if your cats go outside at all, or your dogs, I assume your dogs go outside, it's a good idea to have them, and your veterinarian will usually recommend it too, because it can keep them from getting other diseases as well, like heartworm that's transmitted by mosquitoes. Okay, so now we're going to talk about some activities that you guys can do. So for little kids, you can choose a picture to draw. So Rhea, you can draw a creepy crawly bug of your choice, or you can draw a picture of you keeping yourself safe from ticks while you're outside. Big kids can draw a picture of a creepy crawly and label some important parts. You can make a comic about bed bugs, or you can write a few sentences about ticks. And then for middle schoolers, you can write a paragraph about bed bugs. You can draw 4 different creepy crawlers and label their basic anatomy, or you can create a comic about fleas and your pets. And then you guys know you can email your homework to me at scientist.com, and we're going to do a big drawing at the end of the semester or at the end of the session. And then I have some resources for you guys as well, and I will email